All right, so get this. Imagine explaining nuclear reactors, but you can only use words a 10-year-old would know. Yeah, that's the genius behind Thing Explainer. It's not just about, like, simplifying the words, but, like, really getting a deeper understanding.
Yeah, it's really interesting how that kind of like restriction makes you think differently about even the simplest things. Like, take, for instance, explaining why the Earth is round. I mean, we often use, all this jargon, but Thing Explainer kind of shows us that sometimes just saying round, it just clicks.
Exactly, and that's what I really enjoy about Monroe's whole approach here. He takes these super complicated, almost scary topics, like nuclear reactors or the Mars rover, you know, and makes them, I don't know, more approachable without like making them, dumb.
Yeah, it's like he found this perfect balance between keeping it simple but still accurate. Like when he calls a nuclear reactor a heavy metal power building, it sounds kind of funny, a little out there even, but when you really think about it, that's what it is.
Exactly. And by removing all that technical jargon,
Right.
he's really showing us how things work at their core. And it's like, oh, I get it now.
And that's where the real magic happens, right? It's when we move past just memorizing a bunch of terms and
Yeah.
actually start understanding how things work. It's like the difference between just looking at a map and actually knowing how to get around a city.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not just here's what this thing is, it's here's how it works. And more
Huh?
importantly, like here's why you should even care.
Absolutely. A great example of that is when he talks about the Mars rover. He calls it the Red World Space Car, which is so clever and easy to remember. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on to explain, how it's looking for any sign of water, which would be huge because it might mean there's life beyond Earth.
Yeah, it's like he's tapping into that natural human curiosity we all have about space and like where we fit into all of it. I mean, who hasn't looked up at the stars and wondered if we're alone, right?
Precisely. And by framing the rover's mission in a way we can all relate to, it makes us think about these really deep questions. It's about getting excited about the universe and being open to these bigger questions.
And speaking of big, how about we get into something even more complex, the human body? Monroe uses that same, fun but insightful way of explaining things, like when he calls our organs just bags of stuff inside you.
Yeah, and while it's funny, it also points out how all these different systems in our bodies have to work together to keep us alive.
It's like he's peeled back all these complicated layers and shown us this really simple but accurate picture of what's going on inside us.
And maybe even more interesting is that he doesn't shy away from things we don't know yet. Like when he talks about those strange boxes inside our cells, the ones scientists are still trying to figure out what they're there for.
It's a good reminder that even with all the incredible things we've discovered, there's still so much left to learn, even about ourselves. Makes you feel kind of small, right?
It really does. And that feeling that we don't know everything is a big part of Thing Explainer. It's not about having all the answers, but about wanting to learn more.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the things we see every day that are the most interesting, like who would have thought a lock could be so fascinating?
Right. When he calls it a shape checker, it's like this everyday thing becomes a little puzzle. And the way he explains how it works, so simple, it makes you appreciate how clever it really is.
It's like he's giving us a whole new way of looking at things.
Mm.
And it's not just about how it works. He also talks about how locks are all about who has access to things, like who has the right shape and who doesn't.
That's a really smart point. It shows how something as simple as a lock can have a bigger impact on, well, on everything, like who gets to be in the group and who doesn't. It reminds us that technology isn't always, good or bad, but even simple things like locks can change the world.
This is so interesting. I love how Thing Explainer makes us think about these bigger ideas,
Hmm.
like how just changing one word can change how we see everything.
Exactly. It's about understanding the power of words, how they can either, make things clear or hide the truth. And speaking of making things clear, how about we talk about one of the most impressive things he explains, the Large Hadron Collider?
Oh, yeah, that one blew my mind. He takes this massive, crazy machine that's smashing atoms together to figure out the secrets of the universe, and he just calls it a big, tiny thing hitter. So good.
It's so simple, yet it gets right to the heart of what the LHC does. And it's not just about simplifying the language, it's about making science itself less intimidating, something we can all understand.
Exactly. It's like he's taking away the mystery of these complex scientific things
Mhm.
and showing us that at the end of the day, it's all about us wanting to understand how things work.
Exactly. And that brings us to another important point, how everything is connected. Thing Explainer doesn't just explain things separately, it shows how things that seem totally different are actually related.
Yeah, it's like he's weaving together all this knowledge, showing how everything from a lock to the Large Hadron Collider is all part of the same story. The story of humans being curious and trying to understand the universe and our place in it.
It's like he's saying, you don't need to be some kind of genius to appreciate how amazing the universe is. You just got to be a little curious and open to seeing things in a new way.
And that's what makes Thing Explainer more than just a fun book, you know?
Hmm.
It's really celebrating that human need to learn and explore and understand. It reminds us that even though everything's so specialized these days, there's still room for wonder and seeing how everything's connected.
Definitely. And it makes us think about the words we use every day, right? Like Monroe shows us, the words we choose can either make things clear or confuse things even more. They can either help us understand something new or keep us stuck.
It's like he's giving us this toolkit, and not just to understand the world, but to help us explain it to other people in a way that's interesting, easy to understand, and maybe even a little funny.
And that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to do, don't you think? Being able to take something complicated and explain it simply can help people understand each other better, start conversations, and maybe even help everyone be more informed and engaged.
Totally. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Thing Explainer, I want to leave you with this. What's something in your own life, something you think is really complicated, that you could try to explain using just those 1,000 words like Monroe? It could be anything, your job, a hobby, some scientific thing you've always wondered about, or even just putting together one of those, really complicated pieces of furniture.
Yeah, give it a try. You might be surprised how much you enjoy finding that simple and clear way of explaining things, and maybe even find a little humor in it along the way.
It's been great chatting about Thing Explainer with you today.
Yeah, this was fun.